Did you even know that Kate Winslet was in Avatar: The Way of Water? Did Quaritch and Spider's relationship feel forced? Here's the dumbest things that happened in the Avatar sequel. Avatar: The Way of Water is stuck in a strange limbo. It's both a sequel, picking up where Avatar left off in a literal sense, but also clearly made with a nostalgic zeal to remind people of the original. Think of the way the Jurassic World movies feel more like Jurassic Park theme park rides than actual extensions of a coherent story. The dumbest thing in The Way of Water that we just have to live with is how it shoehorns new roles for Sigourney Weaver and Stephen Lang into the story, even though both of their characters died in the first movie. Weaver's new character, Kiri, a child mysteriously born of the avatar of her original character, Dr. Grace Augustine, at least has some strange messianic qualities that are unique. But asking us to just roll with Lang's psychotic Colonel Quaritch being reborn as a recombinant form of Avatar is a bit much. It retcons Avatar in the sense that the technology to create a digital copy of a human consciousness apparently existed at the time, and Quaritch and his team backed themselves up before the final showdown. So essentially, like the ill-fated ending of Lost, The Way of Water is asking us to invest in a world where death has no meaning. Were Grace Augustine and the other scientists also backed up? That would certainly explain why her avatar is just hanging around in Earth tank, for no discernible purpose. The biggest criticism of the first Avatar is that Jake Sully is a classic white savior. It's tone deaf that way that a complete stranger to the Na'vi way of life ends up uniting the tribes and being chosen as Toruk Makto. You'd think years later in The Way of Water, since Jake has integrated more fully and had half Na'vi children with Neytiri, that this would be less of a prevalent theme. But it seems Kiri has been added to the story as a second white savior for the price of one. Though raised as Na'vi, she's essentially a sort of reincarnated version of Grace Augustine, the other most benevolent white person from the first movie. Kiri clearly has some Chosen One type powers brewing, as she commutes with nature and can hear the heartbeat of Eywa, the All-Mother. Not to mention, The Way of Water goes the same route as Star Wars: The Phantom Menace in introducing the idea of immaculate conception with a couple of casual offhand remarks. It's apparently a total mystery how Grace Augustine's comatose avatar gave birth to a child, although the movie pulls at a very disturbing thread a couple of times, as Kiri and other characters wonder who her father might be.
There is something really interesting going on in there biologically. I would die to get samples.
Few sins of the original Avatar are as unforgivable as unobtainium, the precious mineral that humans are on Pandora to harvest. Fortunately, no one utters that ridiculous word in The Way of Water. Although the reappearance of humanity is abruptly handled, we do learn early on that they have a much more straightforward and urgent reason to return to Pandora than getting rich. That is, Earth is dying, and Pandora is to be entirely colonized as humanity's new home. This creates a compelling global threat to all of the Na'vi clans that's not even based on a bad pun. But fully 2/3 of the way through The Way of Water, we learn there's an entirely brand new magical substance that humanity is after on Pandora. It's a serum harvested from the brains of giant sentient whale-like creatures called Tolkien. This enzyme called Amrite apparently stops the aging process entirely in humans. So the hunting of Tolkiens becomes another lazy, obvious allegory for the awful colonizers not to respect sacred Na'vi traditions. Since the Metkayina bond with the Tolkien and are heartbroken at their loss. The humans, of course, harvest just about a 2-liter soda bottle's worth of Amrite from a Tolkien the size of a battleship and leave the rest to rot. Were you even aware that the great Kate Winslet is in this movie? She provides the voice of Ronal, the wife of the Metkayina's leader, and mostly glares disapprovingly at Jake and family for endangering her tribe. The Way of Water introduces many new characters, but not a single one has the star power of Winslet, an Oscar winner and one of the greatest actresses of her generation. So it's a bit dumb when you realize that, like the majority of characters in this overstuffed movie, she didn't have time for any sort of character arc or subplot of her own. While it's likely she has a bigger role to play in future installments, it doesn't make her bit part in The Way of Water any less of a missed opportunity. Other than mourning her soul sister Tolkien's death and being very justifiably angry at the Sullys for bringing destruction with them out to the islands, Ronal barely registers. This is why Kate Winslet had to hold her breath underwater for more than 7 minutes.
Yes, that's true.
Probably the most preposterous running thread in Avatar: The Way of Water is the relationship between the recombinant Colonel Quaritch and his long-lost son, Spider. The kid is the most prominent, fully human character left in the story, having been left on Pandora as a small child and raised with the Na'vi. The Way of Water wants us to buy into big plot points, pivoting on the burgeoning emotional bonds between this child of two worlds and the lab-grown avatar of his deceased father. The problem with this is that Quaritch, in either human or avatar form, is by far the most one-dimensional character in either movie. He's nothing but a murderous soldier, and he outright tells Spider that since he's technically a form of clone, he's not actually his father anyway. Sure, Quaritch and Spider may have a few bonding moments while the latter was being held hostage, but it really didn't go far enough. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, Quaritch is suddenly concerned about Spider when Neytiri threatens his life in late standoff. Spider then saves Quaritch's life, which doesn't feel earned at all. It also doesn't even really matter, because presumably the humans could just keep growing new Quaritch recombinant and re-downloading his consciousness anyway. James Cameron has an incredibly successful career, so perhaps he's earned a little bit of self-referential leeway. But we have to bring into question the sequence near the end of The Way of Water, where star-crossed Crushes, Lo'ak, and Raya attempt to survive by clambering around the outside of an overturned ship. These moments are pretty shamelessly close to the beats from Cameron's Titanic, to the point that it takes you out of the movie a little bit. It's already a bit much to ask us to just roll with their romance, which lazily recreates the same beats as Jake and Neytiri's story in the first movie. Just like his father, Lo'ak is a stranger to the Metkayina clan, but learns their ways and charms the chief's daughter. He also befriends a dangerous and sacred animal that they revere, and is told "I see you" by Raya in a direct echo.
Alien, that's all they see.
I see.
During the sequence when a whaling vessel slowly turns upside down, Lo'ak and Raya end up precariously perched right on top of it as it submerges in the water. Just like Jack and Rose in Titanic, they promise to hold on to each other when they take the plunge. What's James Cameron up to? One of the strangest scenes in Avatar: The Way of Water is when Norm and Max fly out to the islands to try and see what's going on with Kiri, who had a seizure while connected to the Metkayina version of the Spirit Tree. Attaching diodes and machines to Kiri's head, Norm speculates that her spiritual connection to Eywa may be a side effect of epilepsy. It's an abrupt and strange suggestion after lots of evidence that there may be nothing special about Kiri at all. This flies in the face of the genuinely faithful nature of both Avatar movies and never gets followed up on. In general, the spiritual purity of the Na'vi and the real-world influence of Eywa is empirically obvious. In the first movie, the Na'vi basically are losing the fight until Eywa intervenes and possesses all the animal life on the planet to attack the human forces. Avatar as a franchise seems to have no interest in sincerely exploring the delicate balance between science and faith. This scene, which dabbles in skepticism just for the sake of a distraction, is one of the dumbest things in The Way of Water. Most people don't go to the movies to read, so subtitles can often be a deal breaker when you're browsing the Netflix menu. As Jake Sully learned the ways of the Omaticaya clan of the Na'vi in the first Avatar, the movie was committed to showing both English and Na'vi being spoken consistently, and subtitling the alien dialogue whenever necessary. The way language was treated was logical and consistent. But in The Way of Water, director James Cameron and company must have realized early on that since Jake has now been living with the Na'vi for more than a decade, they would essentially be making a foreign language film. To solve this, very early in the sequel, Jake tells us via voiceover that he's learned the Na'vi language so thoroughly that when he hears it, it may as well be English. And presto, suddenly we also hear his children and all other Na'vi speaking English. When Na'vi interact with other English-speaking characters later, they're still subtitled. But whenever Na'vi are talking to each other, it's all English for convenience's sake. It does save the audience a lot of subtitle reading, but it's a bracingly dumb and inelegant tweak to the rules of the way the reality of what we're seeing it being depicted. After the earnest pride that the first Avatar took in realizing Na'vi culture, it's kind of surprising that The Way of Water just shrugs and transforms 90% of potentially Na'vi dialogue into plain old English.